when you get back with the players, and who knows when this happens, do you treat it just like a brand new season as far as expectations of what to get from each player based on, as individuals, what they've shown you in the past and how to deploy them? I'm just wondering what the thought process is if this all thing actually happens and you have to ramp up for a playoffs, and trying to understand your players and what they can give you and how to rethink everything given what they're like when you first come in camp.
Well, obviously it'd be a different scenario because most of the guys, all of the guys typically in a normal year will have been skating in August, early September, some in July, at their own pace, what they feel is best for them. In this instance, I don't know if they'll have that luxury before or not. Right now they don't. So I think it starts with your strength and conditioning coach, your medical team. Where are they at? What is the risk of injury if we ramp up too quickly? So you'll get some feedback and direction from their standpoint. I think the medical team typically deals with guys coming off, especially if it's an injury where they can't skate for an extended period of time. So they'll probably have a good idea of what the load should be. Then I got to balance that with how much time do we actually have? Do we have 7 days of camp? Do we have 17 days? You know, that factors into it, how fast we can ramp up. And then I think it's a personal decision or personal conversation with each player. Obviously, Bergie, Z, they may need a little more or a little more time or a different intensity than maybe a DeBrusque or Pasta that's younger. So those are all the things that will go into it. My expectation is, like everyone else's, we got to be ready in a hurry. We got to be ready quicker than the next team, and that's just very hard to predict because no one's ever been through this. So I'm hoping, well, not hoping, I know our players are excited about this opportunity, and I'm saying, assuming it's coming. So I believe that part of it, they'll be highly motivated to get themselves ready to play. And that's where you hope during this break, the guys have taken that to heart and done as best and as most as they can right now to so they don't have to play too much catch up. So that's part of the checking in with the individuals. That's part of the strength coach contacting them to see where they are. So we need to upgrade the program or downgrade it. And that's how we do it for the most part. And after that, we got to get playing. I think our team plays a pretty structured game. So, we're not a loosey-goosey team that just relies on making plays all night to win. So I think that helps us in that regard. Your structure can typically be your friend until you get your legs under you, or it's your security blanket until you find your offensive game. So that's the good part about our team. But I mean, I just think it's an unknown at the end of the day, what team will come out the best, simply because no one's ever been through this.
Thanks, Mick. Sophia, your line's open. Go on ahead. Sophia from
Hi.
Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Bruce. Hope you guys are staying healthy and safe. My question is a two-part question. The first, I would love your opinion. And secondly, I would love to know if you have a heartbeat on what other coaches or GMs are thinking about how much you'd be willing to sacrifice next season in order to complete this season and give it the respect that a playoffs deserves, as opposed to making it a best of three or something like that. So I'm thinking of a situation that's hypothetical where hockey does not come back in the summer, but instead September kind of becomes the training camp, and then you finish the regular season and go into a playoffs October, November, and perhaps similar to the 2012-2013 lockout season, where a season was 48 games and started in late January. Maybe it's more of a sacrifice of the upcoming season as opposed to shortening this season. So I'd love to know your opinion, considering your team was on such a strong pace, and if you have a heartbeat around the league of how people would feel about that idea.
Well, thanks, Sophia. Everyone's good here. Hopefully everyone's good out there on your end, and your family, and everybody's for that matter is healthy. I probably omitted to say that at the start, but obviously our best wishes, and we are good. But as for my opinion on that, about next year and going forward, I'm ready to go whenever they tell us to. It's a situation that will be dictated first from typically, the political side of it. Are we going to open up? Are there buildings available, et cetera? So once that's clarified, what parameters are we playing? And then I think that's all negotiated by the owners, GM/NHLPA. So really, as coaches, we're just in the middle, and we're told what to do, when to be there, and we'll be ready. It's up to us to be ready to go. So on that part, I have no feel for what's going on around the league. There's certainly Donnie and some of the players will give you tidbits and you'll read stuff. But at the end of the day, that's going to come down to those two factions are going to have to get together and, hammer out the details of if it extends and we play the free agency July 1st, obviously we'd be going past that. How does it affect the start of next year? Those are all things that basically the coaches would not have any input in. We're just got to be ready to go. So that's what I've heard around the league. I don't know what the players would be willing to sacrifice going forward next year. I have read that they do not want another interrupted season. So what that means, how late would we be willing to start again? I'd just be speculating, to be honest with you. All I know is what I've read, and I hear July and August a lot. So pushing the season back maybe to November 1st or something to that effect, and then the playoffs into late June. But again, that's just what I've read on various websites. So probably the wrong guy to ask at the end of the day.
Thanks, Sophia. Kevin Dupont, your line's open. Go on ahead. Kevin Dupont, can you hear us? Mike Loftus, we'll try you. Go on ahead. Your line's open.
Hi there, Bruce Cassidy. How are you?
Terrific. Thanks, Mike.
Excellent. Hey, but you brought it up, mixed question. We've had a chance to listen to some other coaches, talk to some other coaches. Your medical staff, training staff, have they, how much of a go-to resource? I mean, how often are you in contact with those guys and monitoring things, where your players stand? Because I know nobody has, nobody's got the same amount of equipment. Everybody has to be on a kind of like a personalized program. And so how much do you, check in with more your training staff than your players on it?
Well, Kevin Neild is our head strength and conditioning coach. He's, assisted by Kenny. So I spoke to him Friday. That was the most recent about where players were. Is there any equipment we need that they wouldn't have that we could order and get shipped to them that realistically could help with their skating stride? They have these different slide boards, because that's the one area I'm concerned about. If you're not able to get on skates and then you jump right on the ice, those muscles you typically use, could be affected, and we got to make sure we guard against that. So again, where's the intensity? What level can we get to in terms of training camp so that we hit the ground running? So those are the conversations I had with him. Players have now adapted up to this point to do their conditioning, whether they're jogging, riding a bike, some that are in a warmer climate, maybe swimming, whatever you need to do for that part of it. But rollerblading would be something that we'd have to look at. Do the players need rollerblades? How do we get them if stores are closed? Whatever, those type of things that maybe could help with those muscles. So that was my biggest concern. Guys will find ways to use their own body weight to keep their core strength strong, their upper body, but it's those skating muscles. So that was the last conversation we had, and how can we best help the players, stay sharp in that area. So that is who I talk to. He then goes through the training staff to go through each player. If they're just coming off an injury, well, we got to be careful with this exercise and et cetera. So that's an individual schedule for each player that he would go through with the medical guys. So this is his area. This is where he's got to excel. And I think if if we get back at this, the groups that have done a good job in that area will probably be a little bit ahead of the ones that haven't.
Hey, Coach, can you hear me?
I do now.
Yeah, it's James. Okay, sorry about that. I hope you're doing well and hope you're staying safe. I was talking to somebody with the PA recently, and not that he felt that, anybody would not go, but he said one thing, a lot of people are starting to talk about is just the aspect of being away from your family for that long, if this comes to fruition. Have you thought about that? Have you had that discussion with any of the players?
I have not, simply because until it's a little more concrete, the what if scenarios are, they're probably going through them in their mind themselves. I don't think you want to be out in front of things, but this is one I think I'd have to get some direction from Donnie on that and how we go about discussing that with the players. And obviously, again, like I said earlier, they would have to be in agreement in some way, shape, or form how that would all work out. Again, I don't know if you had Jimmy, a previous, because I didn't hear you until the end. So I am not sure how the players would react to that, to being away that long. I know every player is invested and motivated to play. There's a lot of a breakdown of the revenues and how that gets distributed. So even the teams that are out, that there's something on the line for them, at least a financial part of it. So I know that the players would have to be, you'd like them to, be unanimous in this decision down the road to get back at it, whatever the parameters are. And obviously it's not going to be ideal for anybody. Not, obviously the fans, the players, the ice conditions they've talked about, the conditioning of the players, the risk of injury. There's a lot of stuff that's, atypical in this situation. So that would be one more thing. Are you isolated in a hotel for X amount of times? Especially if you make a long run, could be as much as six to 8 weeks, right? So there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of little details that maybe that's just broader than, hey, are we playing or not? And hopefully they're, kind of as friendly to the players as possible.
Thanks, Jimmy. Joe McDonald, go on ahead. You are unmuted.
Thanks for doing this, Coach. I know a lot of coaches around the league and even at the AHL level have been participating in Zoom sessions among coaches. One, have you done any of those? And two, if you have, just what have those been like for you?
We've done our own staff. I'm on one this week with some college coaches. We're going to discuss power play. And then I've done a presentation to the East Coast Hockey League coaches, and I've listened in on a college presentation. Ralph Kruger did one that I will be listening to this week. And then Jeff Blashill did one for the USHL, Jared Bednar, the AHL. So I've tried to, listen into as much of them as possible. As for the group ones, I've kept it with our team for now. And like I said, I'm doing one this week, and we'll see where that leads with the rest of the coaches around the league. For me, it's more texting and maybe reaching out to certain guys that I have a relationship with. But that's probably been it for me. I'm watching a lot of our own tape of college free agents was a few weeks ago, getting some prep work done in case we do get started on special teams. The other coaches are doing some pre-scouting system-wise, and I've looked at some guys in Providence. So that's how I've spent my time for the most part, if that answers kind of your question. Done some Zoom meetings for Cole's baseball team. Those are exciting, 9-year-old baseball videos. Enjoyed those. And that's about it.
Dupes, we'll try again. Your line's open. No. All right, moving on.
Don't be shy, Kevin.
We'll go back to Kevin. Connor Ryan, go on ahead. Your line is open.
Hey, Bruce. Thanks for doing this. In terms of, if games are to resume this year, obviously conditioning seems like one of the early challenges for a lot of teams. But for coaches especially, what's the challenge in terms of having a little bit more of an accelerated window to experiment with your lineup and seeing especially where maybe like a newcomer like Kasha or Richie are best utilized, especially, for potential playoff games?
Well, again, it depends on how many regular season games we get to play. We have the luxury, and I say luxury, and I use that term loosely because, we're in a solid position to tinker a little bit more than maybe another team that's right on the bubble. But I don't imagine we're going to have a lot of games to play if we don't get right in the playoffs. So I think we're going to have to pin it down right away, get back to, going over who we feel is the best with who. And again, I think our team's strong no matter how we end up moving the wingers around. Like I said, we got some new bodies. We use Richie and Cash as examples. We were trying to see where they best fit. At the end of the day, I do believe come playoff times, our guys will all be committed, all playing the same way, team first. So no matter what lines they're on, I still think that, we'll be okay in that regard. Clearly, we want to have the best, put each guy in the best position to succeed. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure we have the 12 best forwards out there that give us the best chance to win. And they'll line up where they line up. I mean, in games, sometimes we'll double shift guys, we'll move guys around. So the majority of our guys are used to that. Richie and Kasha, we're getting used to it in their brief period of time here. So hopefully that doesn't throw them off. That's the last thing you want as a player, to be rattled because he gets switched lines. Like I said, most of the guys have been around, have been through it with me, so they understand it. So that's, how we'd approach it. We would go in with what we feel is our best, and from there, depending on the timeline, we'd adjust accordingly. And it's kind of the best you can do right now. And then you hope you've put the players in the best chance on the best lines to succeed.
Tom Keegan, go on ahead. Your line is open.
Thanks. Hey, Bruce, I was wondering if the league were to ask for your feedback on how much time you need, the bare minimum time you need for training camp before you think about games, what would you tell them? And then also, I would think on paper, older teams are maybe at a disadvantage because it takes them longer to get in shape, but also you seem like you have real good leadership and are a tightly knit group. So could that help to compensate for some of the disadvantage of that?
Yeah, and I think that, nobody knows till we get back out there. I mean, we do have some older guys that might take their engine a little longer, but I think they are true professionals and know how to keep them in shape. Maybe better than some of the younger guys that just feel like, oh, when we're ready to go, I can ramp it up. So I do believe some of the veteran guys know that they need to stay with it because it's not a switch you can turn on and off. So that I believe works to our advantage. Now, getting your legs under you quicker, yeah, probably a younger guy, less aches and pains the next day. So I think it's the recovery of the older guys that we got to monitor as much as anything. Less so the conditioning, more the recovery. So to answer your original question, what would be the timeline? That would depend to me entirely on have they been able to skate on their own at some point before we go. So, for example, if we're told we have to stay off the ice until June 30th and we start July 1st and no one's been on the ice, then I think you have to have a minimum of, I'm saying at least 2 weeks now to sort of get guys up and running. If they've been allowed to skate at our facility, whether it's in small groups, by themselves, large groups, whatever that's determined, then that number could go down a little bit. But I can't see anybody saying you got to start in 3 or 4 days. I mean, if you've been able to participate in some workouts, unstructured or unsupervised, like you're allowed to in September, early September before camp, and a number of them, then, maybe a week is enough if you're building in a few regular season games. The next part of that, if it's no regular season games and right into the playoffs, then I don't see how, no matter what, you could get started before 2 weeks and not risk the safety of the players so that you could build in some scrimmages. Because I don't know about exhibition games going right into the playoffs, if that's realistic to tell your team, hey, we're going to go play an exhibition game and then turn around and play a playoff game 3 days later. I mean, you're really risking it there. So, it'd be interesting to see what they come up with once they just determine are there regular season games or not with that number of time. But that would be my opinion.
Butchie, our next question is going to come from Kevin Paul Dupont. I'm going to read it. He texted it to me. Bruce, you were only 4 to 5 years old when Orr scored the big goal in 1970. I assume you were not watching that day. If so, what do you remember? If not, how old were you when it came into your consciousness?
I was going to turn 5. I'm a 65 born. So I did not see it. It may have been on television. Listen, I could have seen it, Kevin, but I don't recall watching it, what I was doing at that time. As I said before, when I was I kept the newspaper from the Ottawa Journal that was on the front page of the sports section, that famous photo. And I cut it out at the time because I loved the Bruins and stuck it on my wall. And I do remember having it on my wall most of my childhood, probably right up till I was a teenager. So that's my recollection from then. I ended up delivering that paper when I was a little bit older, at 8, 9, 10 years old, I forget, in the neighborhood. But that was my recollection. I remember more, unfortunately, of the middle 70s when I was, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, when they lost to the Flyers and Bernie Perrant, and then it was Montreal's dynasty in the late 70s, and Lemaire's overtime goal, and then Lambert's overtime goal. So Those are more clear to me than those 2 cup runs or 2 cup seasons, unfortunately. But that's the way it is. I remember the 2011 one clearly.
Thanks, Dupes. Thanks, Butchie. Rich Thompson, your line's open. Go on ahead.
Bruce, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious, are the Providence Bruins under the same orders to stay in condition? And if you were called back quickly, they be brought into like multiple scrimmages and help the team kind of get ready that way?
That's a good question. They're not allowed to gather either. So they've been given the right to go home. The American League called their season. We would have to discuss that as we get closer. Who would we bring back here for, the so-called Black Aces team? How many would we need if you're going right into playoffs? Would you want 2 teams to scrimmage? I would think most teams would want some level of live competition, probably more against their own group than, like I said, exhibition games. That to me would be a real risk. So yes, that would be a discussion that Donnie and I would have to have, which players are coming, how many, and we'd have to do it fairly quickly. But again, it would all depend on, can we gather in large groups? When are the players actually able to travel again without having to self-quarantine when they get here? So there's some logistical stuff there, but absolutely that would be something I think most teams would certainly look at, go to. And then again, some of it would depend on, are there regular season games before the playoffs? Because that would obviously affect how many bodies you are bringing, because those games would act as some pre-playoff type, I don't want to say warm-up games, because that's being disrespectful, because they are regular season games. But you know what I mean? At least you're getting your feet wet a little bit before the playoffs ramp up.
Joe Haggerty, your line's open. Go on ahead.
Hey, Butchie. Thank you very much for doing this. Just wonder where you are right now, who you're with, and then, with all this time off, and obviously, you have young kids like I do, so you don't have a ton of free time because of that, but you must have more than usual. So any things that unusual that you found yourself kind of getting into, or what you've been doing to kind of, entertain yourself and occupy your time, whether it's, a hobby, whether it's watching more movies and TV, whether it's reading, whatever you've been doing to pass the time.
Right now, I'm in my office by myself, Hags, enjoying my quiet time. In Winchester, Massachusetts, we have not left. We have not gone very far, to be honest with you. Like everybody, probably the grocery store. And what have I done that's interesting? Well, I try to pitch batting practice to Cole, but a lot of the parks are closed, so don't tell anybody, but I got to sneak on. I've been out riding my bike if the weather's agreeable, which hasn't been very often. Hobbies to me is typically reading. What have I read? I'm drawing a blank here. I'm reading a book called The Teenage Brain right now. It's a little more probably scientific and how, it affects, obviously the title speaks for itself. Movies. Julie and I watched one late night the other night, Mystic River, which I haven't seen in 15 years. And, I forgot part of it because I probably watched it on a bus somewhere years ago. Great movie. And last night we watched as a family Benji, the latest edition of Benji. Of course, the family wants a dog. So do I. Julie is the one that's a little bit on the fence. And of course, we outvote her 3-1, but her vote weighs much more than our 3. So we're waiting for that. And that's about it. I did a little yard work the other day because the sun was shining, probably like everyone else, just wanted to be outside, but nothing exciting. Trying to, do a little bit of work, but honestly, I'd be lying to you if I sit here and said there's 8 hours of work to do every day. You can only watch so much video, especially with no new games. Watched a lot of playoff hockey originally when this first happened on the NHL Network, had a lot of replay of previous Stanley Cup playoffs. I thought those were really cool to go back in time and re-educate yourself with the game in the 70s. And that's it. Not much else, just like everyone else, trying to stay responsible with our social distancing, get the kids outside when we can, and, try to make do as best as possible. It'd be nice to see some sunshine, though, that's for sure, to get out and walk around a little more in nicer weather, but see if that happens.
Thanks, Butch. Our last question for today's media availability is going to come from Dan Roach. Go ahead, Dan. Your line's open.
Hey, Bruce, hope you're throwing strikes when it comes to throwing BP to Cole. I know it's not an easy thing to do sometimes.
He hits me all over the park. That's a good thing, I guess, right?
I love that. Just from perspective of the fans, two things. One, you are at 100 points with a dozen to go. You're the ultimate competitor. You have a lot of competitors on your team. How badly do you want to get back to where you were trying to go and resume and you know, kind of have some fun with the Stanley Cup playoffs, which are, you know, everyone knows are such a great thing to watch. And also, how much do you miss the game and being around your staff, just the, you know, the clubbies, I mean, just everybody, the players in the game of hockey?
Well, that's the most difficult part, to be honest with you, because I enjoy the people I work with a lot. Coaches, trainers, GM, medical staff, strength guys. I mean, we're all in it together. I think it's a great group. Typically go to work in a good mood, a good frame of mind, ready to, you know, to get to work and get better that day, but still have some fun and smiles while you're doing it. So that's tough. You just get into a routine as a coach over the years, and I miss mine. I'm not going to lie to you. Great being around the family more at this time of year, but at the end of the day, I do miss going to work every day. As for getting back, obviously our standard is to be Stanley Cup champions, and that hasn't changed, and that won't change. I think every team would think the same way, and with this year being a little bit, well, very unique compared to others, that I think we're all unsure a little bit. Going back, like what it's going to take. But at the end of the day, I think once you start playing, you get a couple games under your belt, you'll get right back at it. No matter what time of year it is, you'll get back to doing what you do best, and that's playing, and hopefully we're the best team at that point. I do believe that once you get back into it, players love the routine and they love the game, and won't matter where we're playing, it won't matter the weather outside. They'll get back at it and be ready to do their best.